To understand how the pyramids of Egypt eventually rose from desert bedrock, we must begin long before a single block of limestone was ever shaped. The story starts in the deep past, in the long stretch of time known as the pre-dynastic era, when early communities along the Nile Valley began forming the cultural foundations that would make monumental construction possible. These were centuries of gradual development rather than sudden breakthroughs. Yet each shift in society, belief, and technology played a crucial role in shaping the world that would later create the pyramids. During the late 4th millennium BCE, the Nile Valley was home to dozens of small agricultural communities. They lived in mud brick houses, grew grain, raised livestock, and navigated the seasonal flooding that nourished the soil. The river provided food, transport, and a predictable rhythm of life, which allowed these settlements to grow larger and more organized. Over generations, some regions expanded into powerful chiefdoms, each led by local rulers who competed for influence. This competition encouraged the production of more elaborate goods, more specialized labor, and more defined social hierarchies. As authority solidified, burial customs became one of the most visible expressions of social status. The earliest monumental structures in Egypt were not pyramids, but simple mastabas. A mastaba was a rectangular mud brick tomb with sloping sides, built to protect the body and belongings of the deceased. In the earliest periods, these tombs were modest, but they gradually became larger and more complex as elites attempted to display their position in life and their expectations for the afterlife. The act of building such structures established an important precedent. That architecture could be a tool for expressing power, legitimacy, and cosmic order. By the time Egypt entered what modern historians call the early dynastic period, roughly at the beginning of the 3rd millennium BCE, the valley had undergone a major transformation. The long process of political consolidation reached its climax under rulers like Narmer, who is often credited with unifying the northern and southern regions of Egypt. Whether this unification happened through a single dramatic conquest or a gradual merging of cultures, the outcome was clear. A centralized state with a pharaoh at its head, supported by administrators, priests, and skilled laborers. This new political structure allowed for large-scale organization, something essential for building monumental architecture. With central authority came new expectations for kingship. Egyptian rulers were no longer viewed solely as powerful leaders. They were seen as divine intermediaries between the gods and the people. Their role extended beyond governance into cosmic order, stability, and prosperity. This divine kingship shaped how Egyptians approached death and the afterlife. A deceased pharaoh was believed to join the gods, especially the sun god Ra, and continue guiding the universe. For such a transition to be successful, the king needed a tomb worthy of his cosmic role. This belief system did more than inspire religious devotion. It created a practical need for tombs that were secure, symbolic, and durable. Early kings of the 1st and 2nd dynasties built increasingly complex mastabas, some containing multiple chambers for possessions, food offerings, and ritual items meant to sustain the king in the afterlife. Archaeological finds from sites such as Abydos and Saqqara reveal sophisticated planning and craftsmanship. These tombs often included surrounding structures for ceremonies, storage rooms for offerings, and carefully arranged burial equipment. Figures like King Jer or King Den, rulers of the earliest dynasties, oversaw the growth of administrative systems that supported these projects. Artisans learned new techniques in carving, masonry, and pottery. Surveyors and labor managers gained experience in organizing workforces. Each tomb built for these early rulers served as a training ground, developing the skills that would later be required on a far grander scale. In addition to architecture, religious ideas were evolving. The concept of the afterlife became more structured, and rituals surrounding burial grew more elaborate. The belief that the Ka, the life essence, needed a protected and recognizable body after death meant that tombs had to be secure and enduring. The earliest attempts at stone construction also appear in this period, mostly in the form of small stone elements or protective slabs. While mud brick remained the main building material, these experiments showed that the idea of building in stone had begun to take root. The landscape of early Egypt shaped these developments as well. The desert plateau, rising above the fertile Nile floodplain, offered a dry and stable environment ideal for preserving burial sites. Tombs built on high ground avoided the destructive forces of floodwaters. Over time, this natural choice for burial locations became symbolically linked with eternity and the journey to the afterlife. The horizon, where the sun set and rose again each day, became a metaphor for death and rebirth. These connections between environment, religion, and architecture would later influence where pyramids were placed and how they were oriented. The rise of King Djoser, also known as Netjereket, marks one of the most important turning points in ancient Egyptian history. It is during his reign, in the early 3rd dynasty, that Egypt took its first bold step from traditional mud-brick tombs into the world of true monumental stone architecture. This transformation was not simply a matter of building bigger tombs. It represented a shift in ambition, in spiritual vision, and in the technical confidence of a society ready to redefine what it meant to honor a king. The step pyramid at Saqqara, the earliest large-scale stone monument ever built, stands as the physical result of these changing ideas. By the beginning of the 3rd dynasty, Egypt had reached a level of political stability and administrative strength that allowed for more daring architectural projects. Earlier rulers had already experimented with increasingly elaborate burial complexes, but they still relied mainly on mud brick construction. Stone, though used occasionally for small decorative or structural elements, had not yet become the primary building material for an entire monumental complex. That changed under Djoser. His reign opened the door to a completely new approach to royal building, and the individual who helped him achieve this breakthrough was a man whose name would echo through Egyptian history: Imhotep. Imhotep served as Djoser's architect, high priest, and advisor. His exact titles varied, but ancient sources describe him as a man of exceptional wisdom and skill. Later generations even elevated him to near-divine status, honoring him as a patron of scribes, healing, and knowledge. While much of his life story is filtered through centuries of mythology, the architectural achievement associated with him is well grounded in archaeological evidence. The step pyramid complex at Saqqara stands as a testament to a brilliant mind willing to push old ideas into entirely new territory. The project began as a traditional mastaba, a rectangular structure meant to protect the king's body. Early construction phases reveal that the builders initially followed familiar patterns, using layered stone blocks shaped to imitate earlier mud brick forms. But at some point in the planning, Imhotep proposed a radical change. Instead of a single rectangular structure, the tomb should rise in a series of stacked levels. This idea created a staircase-like form, a literal step toward the heavens. Each addition expanded the monument upward and outward, transforming a simple tomb into a towering structure unlike anything built before. The result was a pyramid composed of 6 distinct steps, each one slightly smaller than the one below it. When completed, the structure dominated the Saqqara plateau. Although exact heights are difficult to determine today due to erosion, the step pyramid originally stood at a height that impressed all who approached it. For the first time, stone was not just a decorative material, but the foundation, skin, and heart of a massive complex. This use of stone was revolutionary. Working with limestone required new methods of quarrying, transporting, cutting, and fitting. Craftsmen had to refine their techniques, adjusting tools, and developing greater precision. The decision to use stone on such a scale also demanded an enormous workforce. Quarry workers, transport teams, masons, and supervisors all participated in a coordinated effort that demonstrated Egypt's growing administrative capabilities. This successful mobilization proved that large-scale stone construction was not only possible, but sustainable for future rulers. The step pyramid, however, was only one part of a far larger complex. Surrounding it was an enormous enclosure wall, designed with decorative niches and false entrances. Within this enclosure lay courtyards, temples, chapels, storage areas, and ritual spaces. Unlike later pyramid complexes, which often had a more standardized layout, Djoser's complex was an experiment in ceremonial architecture. Many of its structures were symbolic rather than functional, reflecting aspects of royal rituals that connected the pharaoh to the gods. One of the most intriguing features was the Heb-Sed court. The Heb-Sed festival, an important ritual of kingship, celebrated the pharaoh's strength and divine approval. Traditionally performed after many years of rule, it included symbolic races and ceremonies intended to renew the king's power. In the step pyramid complex, replicas of architectural forms from across Egypt were built in stone, creating a space where these rituals could be performed eternally for the deceased king. This idea of a ritual landscape in stone represented a new understanding of how architecture could influence religious belief and the perception of royal authority. The orientation and layout of the complex also reflected cosmological ideas. Egyptian builders placed great emphasis on precise alignment, especially with the cardinal directions. The step pyramid's layout suggests a careful relationship between the monument, the surrounding desert, and the path of the sun. The rising and setting of the sun, associated with cycles of rebirth, played an important role in shaping how royal tombs were designed. Although these symbolic meanings would later be refined in the construction of the Great Pyramids, the roots of this architectural symbolism can already be seen in Djoser's complex. Beyond its religious importance, the step pyramid signaled a new political message. It asserted the strength of the king and the state. The ability to command resources from across Egypt showed a level of centralized control that earlier rulers had not yet demonstrated in such visible form. For the people of Egypt, the step pyramid was a statement. Their king possessed divine backing, earthly authority, and the ability to reshape the physical world. It reinforced the connection between political leadership and cosmic order, an idea that was essential to Egyptian ideology. The construction process itself likely had significant social effects. Large numbers of laborers, craftsmen, and specialists gathered at Saqqara, forming temporary communities near the construction site. Evidence from later periods suggests that such workforces developed their own social structures, work rhythms, and living arrangements. While much of this is more thoroughly documented in later pyramid sites, it is reasonable to conclude that the early foundations of organized labor began to take shape here. Workers gained specialized knowledge, and their collaboration created a sense of shared purpose tied to the success of the king's afterlife. The step pyramid also influenced the development of funerary architecture in practical ways. Beneath the structure lies a complex network of chambers, galleries, and corridors. Although Djoser's burial chamber was at the center, many surrounding rooms were filled with stone vessels, ceremonial objects, and food offerings. The builders used innovative techniques to reinforce ceilings and secure corridors. These underground features reveal evolving ideas about how to protect the king's remains and ensure that all necessary provisions accompanied him into the afterlife. One notable detail is the polished limestone casing that originally covered the step pyramid's exterior. Over time, the casing blocks were removed or eroded, leaving the stepped core visible today. But when the monument was newly completed, it would have shone brightly under the desert sun. The gleaming exterior symbolized purity and eternal endurance, key concepts in Egyptian religious thought. This idea of a bright, reflective outer surface would later play a major role in the appearance of the smooth-sided pyramids at Giza. The reign of King Sneferu marks a moment of extraordinary transformation in ancient Egyptian architecture. Emerging early in the 4th dynasty, Sneferu inherited the architectural innovations pioneered under Djoser, but pushed them to unprecedented heights. Under his leadership, Egypt entered an age of experimentation, engineering breakthroughs and bold construction strategies that shaped the future of pyramid building. While earlier rulers had tested the possibilities of stone, Sneferu turned those possibilities into a refined craft. His pyramids at Meidum and Dahshur stand as milestones on the journey toward the creation of true, smooth-sided pyramids. The first major project associated with Sneferu is the pyramid at Meidum, a site located along the edge of the Fayum region. When work began, the structure did not resemble the form we see today. It started as a stepped monument, perhaps inspired by the step pyramid at Saqqara. But construction evolved significantly over time. Archaeologists have identified multiple building phases. What began as a multi-tiered structure was gradually expanded and modified, with layers added to transform its exterior into a smooth facade. This effort reflects a growing desire to refine the pyramid form from a series of steps into a unified geometric shape. However, something went wrong at Meidum. At some point, likely not long after its completion, large sections of the outer casing and underlying layers collapsed. What remains today is the inner core, rising sharply from a heap of rubble. Although the exact cause of the collapse is debated, several possibilities stand out. The builders may have experimented with angles that were too steep or with construction methods that did not adequately support the outer layers. They may also have miscalculated structural stresses, especially near the base. Whatever the reason, the failure of Meidum provided Egypt's architects with a hard-earned lesson. Achieving perfection in stone required more than ambition. It demanded new engineering knowledge. Sneferu did not abandon pyramid building after this setback. Instead, he doubled down on his vision. The lessons learned from Meidum were applied to his next projects at Dahshur, a desert site farther north. Here the red pyramid and the bent pyramid rise from the landscape, each reflecting a different stage in the evolution of pyramid design. These monuments represent some of the most important engineering experiments in ancient history. The bent pyramid was Sneferu's first major project at Dahshur. From a distance, its unusual shape is unmistakable. The lower portion rises at a steep angle, but about halfway up, the slope shifts dramatically, creating a characteristic bend. This change was not a stylistic choice, but a structural correction made during construction. Builders likely realized that continuing the original steep angle would risk destabilizing the monument, possibly repeating the problems encountered at Meidum. The decision to adjust the angle mid-construction reveals an adaptive approach, one that valued stability and long-term endurance over rigid adherence to initial plans. This adjustment also suggests a growing awareness of weight distribution, stress lines, and the behavior of massive stone structures. The bent pyramid was still a remarkable achievement. It was built with precision-cut limestone blocks, and, unlike most later pyramids, much of its outer casing remains intact. The polished limestone surface would once have gleamed in the sun, creating a visually striking monument that reflected both architectural ambition and practical caution. Although its unusual shape may appear imperfect, it played an essential role in developing the smooth-sided pyramid form. Not far from the bent pyramid stands the Red Pyramid, Sneferu's final and most successful pyramid at Dahshur. This monument represents the culmination of everything learned during the earlier experiments. It rises with a consistent, shallower angle, creating a stable and harmonious geometric shape. The structure earned its modern name from the reddish hue of its core limestone blocks, though it originally would have been covered in bright white casing stones. When viewed in its completed form, the Red Pyramid would have appeared as a gleaming beacon rising from the desert. The achievements seen in the Red Pyramid reflect a fully matured engineering method. Builders demonstrated a clear understanding of structural requirements, weight distribution, and foundation stability. They refined quarrying techniques to produce uniformly shaped blocks. They improved transportation systems, possibly using sledges, water lubrication, and coordinated labor teams to move massive stones over long distances. They also perfected the interlocking patterns that stabilized the pyramid's internal core. The result was not just a functional monument, but a masterpiece of precision, symmetry, and endurance. Sneferu's construction program extended beyond the pyramids themselves. Each pyramid was part of a larger complex that included valley temples, causeways, offering chapels, and subsidiary structures. These complexes reveal a growing emphasis on ritual architecture. The valley temple served as the ceremonial entry point, connected to the pyramid by a long causeway that likely hosted processions during funerary rituals. At the pyramid's base, a mortuary temple allowed priests to perform offerings and maintain the king's afterlife cult. These architectural elements became standard features in later pyramid complexes, including those at Giza. To support these monumental projects, Sneferu oversaw a vast administrative network. Organization was essential. Skilled masons shaped the stones, surveyors ensured accurate alignments, and teams of laborers hauled materials from quarries to construction sites. Logistics specialists tracked food supplies, tools, clothing, and housing for the workers. The coordination required to manage these tasks demonstrated the sophistication of the Egyptian state. Sneferu's projects likely involved tens of thousands of laborers during peak seasons, most of them farmers who contributed their labor during the annual inundation of the Nile, when agricultural work paused. Sneferu's ambitious building program also influenced Egypt's economic and political landscape. Quarrying on such a scale required expanding mining operations in regions like Tura, where fine limestone was extracted. Expeditions were organized to gather timber, copper, and other materials essential for tools and construction. These activities strengthened state control over natural resources and reinforced Egypt's trade networks. The ability to mobilize these resources reinforced the pharaoh's prestige, demonstrating that he held both earthly and divine authority. Beyond practical concerns, Sneferu's pyramids shaped religious understanding. While the step pyramid had introduced the idea of a structure rising toward the heavens, Sneferu's smooth-sided designs took this symbolism to a new level. The gradually sloping sides evoked rays of sunlight, connecting the pharaoh with the sun god Ra. As beliefs about the king's afterlife evolved, the pyramid became a powerful representation of ascent, transformation, and divine connection. This symbolism would reach its fullest expression in the reign of Sneferu's son, Khufu, whose own pyramid at Giza would become an enduring emblem of ancient Egypt. Sneferu's reign also strengthened the role of architects and administrators in Egyptian society. Although Imhotep belonged to an earlier generation, his influence carried forward. The architects who worked for Sneferu refined many concepts that Imhotep had introduced, including the use of stone, complex layout planning, and careful alignment. Their work demonstrated that architecture was not simply a craft, but a discipline rooted in observation, experimentation, and adaptation. When Khufu, also known by the Greek form Cheops, ascended the throne in the early 4th dynasty, Egypt stood at the height of its stability, resources, and technological confidence. His father, Sneferu, had already transformed pyramid building from experimental craft into a finely tuned architectural discipline. The groundwork had been laid, the techniques refined, and the possibilities proven. Under Khufu, these achievements would converge into a single monumental project that still captures the imagination of the world: the Great Pyramid at Giza. The decision to construct a pyramid of unprecedented scale was rooted in Khufu's political authority and religious standing. As a 4th dynasty pharaoh, he was viewed not just as a king, but as a divine ruler whose power extended into both earthly and cosmic realms. Such a ruler required a tomb that matched the grandeur of his role. The Great Pyramid was not simply a burial site. It was the ultimate statement of kingship, a structure designed to assert eternal sovereignty and secure a cosmic place among the gods. The site chosen for this project was the Giza plateau, west of the Nile near the growing center of Memphis. This site offered several advantages: a stable bedrock foundation, proximity to quarries, and access to the Nile for transporting materials. The plateau also rose prominently above the floodplain, allowing the pyramid to dominate the landscape. With a commanding view of the surrounding region, the location underscored Khufu's authority and projected his legacy across generations. Building on the architectural knowledge refined under Sneferu, Khufu's engineers approached the project with meticulous preparation. The very first task was to prepare the foundation. Workers cut into the bedrock, leveling the surface with remarkable precision. Modern studies reveal that the base of the Great Pyramid varies only slightly in height across its extensive perimeter, a testament to the skill of ancient surveyors. This leveled foundation was essential for supporting the immense weight of the structure. The construction materials came from multiple sources. Most of the blocks were quarried directly from the plateau and nearby sites, consisting of limestone cut into manageable shapes. The fine white casing stones, intended to create a smooth exterior surface, were transported from Tura on the eastern side of the Nile. Granite required for internal chambers came from Aswan, far to the south. Moving such heavy materials over long distances demanded a well-organized labor force and efficient transport systems. Sledges, wooden rollers, and possibly lubricated pathways were used to shift stones across the desert, while boats carried stones along the Nile. The scale of the workforce itself was extraordinary. Although no ancient records provide exact numbers, evidence from later workers' settlements indicates a combination of full-time skilled laborers and part-time workers drawn from the general population during the flood season. These workers were not enslaved, but were engaged in a state-organized system that provided food, housing, and medical care. The project supported hundreds of specialists, including architects, stonemasons, surveyors, bakers, brewers, and transport teams. The labor force formed a functioning community with responsibilities, schedules, and social ties centered around the construction effort. At the heart of the pyramid's design lay a network of internal chambers and passageways that reveal the complexity of the builder's vision. Unlike earlier pyramids, with simpler internal structures, the Great Pyramid includes several chambers positioned at different levels. The King's Chamber, crafted from massive granite blocks, sits high within the pyramid's core. Its ceiling consists of layered granite beams arranged to distribute weight outward, preventing collapse under the enormous load above. Above this chamber, a series of smaller relieving spaces helps channel the pyramid's weight away from the central room. Below the King's Chamber lies the Queen's Chamber, a smaller room whose purpose remains debated. It may have served as a symbolic space, a storage area for ritual objects, or part of a larger spiritual plan related to Khufu's journey into the afterlife. Even deeper within the structure lies the unfinished subterranean chamber, carved directly into the bedrock. Its rough condition suggests that plans for the interior evolved during construction, or that its original function was modified as the pyramid rose. The Grand Gallery, one of the most striking architectural features within the pyramid, extends upward from the Queen's Chamber area toward the King's Chamber. This tall, corbelled passageway reflects careful planning and masterful stonework. Its precise angles and smooth surfaces suggest a structure intended to support both functional and symbolic roles. Some scholars interpret it as a grand ceremonial pathway within the architectural design, while others view it as part of the internal engineering needed to move large blocks into place. The exterior form of the Great Pyramid is equally impressive. Although the outer casing stones have largely been stripped away over millennia, enough remain to show the extraordinary quality of the original surface. These casing blocks were cut so precisely that gaps between some stones were barely the width of a human hair. When new, the pyramid's smooth surface would have reflected sunlight brilliantly, creating an awe-inspiring sight visible from great distances. Aligning the pyramid with the cardinal directions required exceptional skill. The builders achieved an orientation so accurate that modern measurements struggle to explain the methods used. Some theories suggest that the ancient Egyptians observed the circumpolar stars or used solar shadow techniques. Others propose that they employed water-filled trenches to establish level reference lines. Whatever the method, the precision points to a sophisticated understanding of observational astronomy and geometric planning. The construction process likely unfolded in carefully timed stages. Workers expanded the pyramid layer by layer, building internal corridors and chambers as they advanced. Ramps, whether straight, zigzagging, or spiraling around the exterior, were used to move stones to higher levels. The exact ramp design continues to be debated, but most theories agree that the system had to be adaptable, allowing builders to adjust as construction progressed. Such adaptability shows a deep understanding of practical engineering challenges. The pyramid complex extended beyond the central monument. To the east stood the mortuary temple, where priests performed daily rituals to sustain the king's spirit. A long causeway connected this temple to a valley temple near the Nile, serving as the ceremonial gateway. Smaller satellite pyramids were built nearby, possibly for queens or symbolic functions. Rows of mastaba tombs surrounded the central pyramid complex, housing officials and relatives who sought eternal proximity to the king. As construction continued, the project shaped the surrounding region. Worker villages, storage facilities, bakeries, and administrative areas grew around the site. Excavations of these settlements reveal details of daily life: bread molds, fish bones, pottery fragments, and simple housing structures. These finds provide a human dimension to a project often described in purely monumental terms. Behind the limestone blocks were the lived experiences of cooks, laborers, artisans, and overseers. People who contributed to a national undertaking that would outlive them all. Khufu's leadership was central to maintaining momentum and ensuring resources flowed to Giza. His administration coordinated quarry expeditions, oversaw agricultural production, and maintained social order. Connections with the priesthood reinforced his authority, strengthening the religious significance of the project. The enormous scale of the Great Pyramid symbolized not only his personal power, but also the unity of Egypt at a time when the state was strong and the economy thriving. With Khufu's Great Pyramid established as the monumental centerpiece of the Giza plateau, the kings who followed him stepped into a landscape already charged with political significance, religious meaning, and architectural expectation. Khafra, traditionally considered Khufu's son, and Menkaure, Khafra's successor, each contributed their own pyramids and complexes to this sacred ground. Their monuments, though smaller than Khufu's masterpiece, played a crucial role in shaping the fully developed necropolis we recognize today. Together, they completed the triad of pyramids that has defined Giza for thousands of years. Khafra inherited not only the throne, but also the task of continuing the architectural legacy of his dynasty. By the time he came to power, the Great Pyramid was already a symbol of royal authority extending across Egypt. Building a second pyramid at Giza reinforced the plateau's role as the ceremonial heart of the Fourth Dynasty. Khafra's pyramid, slightly smaller in height than Khufu's but positioned on higher ground, created the illusion that it was of equal or even greater size. This strategic placement shows an awareness of visual impact and a desire to maintain architectural parity with his father's monument. The construction of the Khafra pyramid followed principles refined under Khufu, but introduced distinctive features. The pyramid originally shone with high-quality limestone casing stones, some of which still cling to the summit. These surviving blocks offer a rare glimpse of how pyramids once appeared before erosion, and the removal of casing stones altered their profiles. The smooth, polished exterior would have reflected sunlight, giving the structure a radiant presence that complemented the Great Pyramid's grandeur. Khafra's architects emphasized not only the pyramid itself, but also its broader ceremonial setting. His mortuary temple, located at the eastern base of the pyramid, was constructed with massive limestone blocks and included granite elements brought from Aswan. This temple served as the focal point for rituals that honored Khafra's spirit. The layout featured courtyards, columned halls, and offering rooms, all designed to support daily and seasonal ceremonies performed by priests dedicated to sustaining the king in the afterlife. A long causeway linked the mortuary temple to Khafra's Valley Temple, situated near the edge of the Nile floodplain. The Valley Temple stands as one of the best-preserved structures of its era. Its interior features massive granite pillars, alabaster floors, and carefully fitted stone walls, revealing skilled craftsmanship and a strong emphasis on durability. Archaeological finds within the Valley Temple include statues of Khafra himself, carved from dark stone and depicting the king in a serene yet powerful pose. One famous depiction shows Khafra seated with the falcon god Horus hovering protectively behind his head, symbolizing divine approval and royal legitimacy. But perhaps the most iconic feature of Khafra's complex is the Great Sphinx, carved directly from the bedrock of the Giza plateau. Although debates exist about its precise dating, the majority of evidence links the Sphinx to Khafra's reign. The massive statue combines a human head with a lion's body, embodying strength, wisdom, and royal authority. Its position near Khafra's Valley Temple suggests a symbolic guardian role, watching over the necropolis and the approach to the king's complex. The creation of the Sphinx required a unique set of techniques. Instead of transporting stone blocks from a quarry, workers sculpted the statue from a natural limestone outcrop. This method demanded careful planning, as the builders had to work with the rock's natural layers and imperfections. The resulting statue displayed refined artistry, from the contours of the face to the alignment of the lion's body. Though weathered over time, the Sphinx remains a powerful testament to the artistic and symbolic ambitions of Khafra's reign. The landscape of Giza changed significantly under Khafra's influence. The placement of his pyramid and the addition of the Sphinx shifted the balance of the necropolis, transforming it into a site of both spiritual power and architectural unity. Khafra's project built upon the foundation laid by Khufu, but added new layers of meaning, linking kingship with solar symbolism, divine protection, and monumental artistry. Following Khafra, the next major figure to shape Giza was Menkaure. Unlike the imposing scale of the first two pyramids, Menkaure's pyramid is notably smaller, yet its reduced height does not reflect a decline in craftsmanship or ambition. Instead, the pyramid demonstrates a shift in how royal priorities were expressed. Menkauri's project focused on refinement, quality, and elaborate temple features rather than sheer size. Menkauri's pyramid was constructed with a combination of limestone and granite. The lower courses were clad in red granite, brought from the quarries of Aswan. This choice gave the pyramid's base a distinctive appearance, contrasting with the white limestone casing intended for the upper portions. The use of granite, a much harder material than limestone, reflects both technological skill and a deliberate aesthetic decision. The builder's ability to shape, transport, and fit granite blocks demonstrates a high level of craftsmanship. Beneath its polished exterior, Menkaur's pyramid contained a complex internal structure. A descending passage led to the burial chamber, which included niches and recesses for burial equipment. Elements of the design suggest ongoing experimentation with layout and function. These underground features, though simpler than the intricate system within the Great Pyramid, reveal continued interest in protecting the king's body and ensuring a successful journey into the afterlife. Menkauri's mortuary temple, built at the base of the pyramid, also stands out for its scale and sophistication. Excavations revealed numerous statues of Menkaur, often depicting him alongside a goddess or a symbolic figure representing one of Egypt's regions. These statues served religious and political functions, presenting the king as a ruler, supported by divine forces and connected to the unity of the land. The mortuary temple's design included corridors, offering rooms, and ceremonial spaces where priests conducted rituals long after the king's burial. The valley temple associated with Menkaur's complex also contains evidence of high-quality stonework and craftsmanship. Although parts of the structure were left unfinished, possibly due to the king's death, the work that was completed demonstrates continuity with earlier traditions. Large blocks of limestone and granite were fitted with precision, and the arrangement of rooms reflects a carefully planned ritual function. One striking feature of Menkaur's reign is the attention given to the artistic representation of the king. The statues discovered at Giza show Menkaur in a youthful, idealized form, reflecting the Egyptian value of eternal perfection. These statues were not merely decorative. They embodied the king's divine essence and served as physical anchors for his spirit. Their placement within the mortuary complex allowed them to participate symbolically in rituals, reinforcing Menkaur's presence within the sacred landscape. The three main pyramids at Giza, Khufu's, Khafra's, and Menkaur's, form a triad that appears deliberately spaced and aligned. Their placement may reflect astronomical considerations, religious symbolism, or practical planning. Some modern theories suggest connections with star patterns, though such interpretations remain debated. Regardless of exact intention, the coordinated layout reinforces the idea that Giza functioned as a unified necropolis shaped by dynastic continuity. By the end of the 4th dynasty, the monumental pyramids at Giza had transformed the Egyptian landscape and elevated the idea of royal architecture to unparalleled heights. Yet the story of pyramid building did not end there. As Egypt transitioned into the 5th and 6th dynasties, pyramid construction continued, but with new priorities, new symbolism, and new architectural practices. The focus shifted from sheer size and engineering complexity toward innovations in religious expression and textual tradition. These changes reveal a society evolving in its understanding of kingship, the afterlife, and the role of monumental architecture. The rulers of the 5th dynasty inherited a kingdom with strong centralized power and a rich architectural legacy. However, their approach to pyramid construction differed notably from that of their predecessors. Instead of competing with the scale of the Giza giants, they emphasized religious meaning and integration of textual tradition. Pyramids built during this period were smaller and used less refined stonework, but they introduced elements that would influence Egyptian funerary culture for centuries. One of the defining features of the Fifth Dynasty was the emergence of sun temples. These were large ceremonial sites dedicated to the sun god Ra, reflecting a growing emphasis on solar worship. Kings such as Userkaf, Sahure, Neferirkare, and Nusere commissioned these temples, which typically included open courtyards, obelisks, and altars where rituals could be performed under the open sky. The increased importance of the sun god marked a significant shift in royal ideology. While earlier dynasties had already linked the pharaoh to celestial powers, the Fifth Dynasty solidified the king's role as the earthly representative of Ra. This solar emphasis also affected pyramid complexes. The design and orientation of pyramids continued to reflect celestial considerations, but the accompanying temples now incorporated stronger solar symbolism. Mortuary temples were built with more elaborate reliefs, depicting scenes of offerings, royal triumphs, and religious ceremonies. These reliefs served both decorative and ritual purposes, reinforcing the connection between the king, the gods, and the cosmic order. Sahure's pyramid complex at Abu Sir provides an excellent example of these developments. Although his pyramid was smaller than those at Giza, the accompanying mortuary temple featured extensive reliefs illustrating royal hunts, military expeditions, and processions of foreign tribute bearers. These scenes offered a narrative of royal authority and extended Egypt's visual storytelling traditions. The artistry achieved during this period was sophisticated, revealing skilled craftsmen who excelled in creating detailed, expressive imagery. The Pyramid of Neferirkare, also located at Abu Sir, presents another noteworthy development. Initially intended as a step pyramid, it was later modified into a smooth-sided pyramid, mirroring some of the construction transitions seen in earlier dynasties. This modification suggests a continuing process of experimentation and adaptation. Builders adjusted plans in response to evolving religious expectations and architectural standards, demonstrating that pyramid construction remained dynamic rather than formulaic. One of the most significant innovations of the later 5th and 6th dynasties was the introduction of the pyramid texts. These inscriptions, carved onto the interior walls of royal pyramids, marked the first appearance of extensive funerary writings within burial chambers. The pyramid texts were not decorative. They were deeply religious documents consisting of spells, prayers, and incantations designed to guide the king through the afterlife. The earliest fully preserved pyramid texts appear in the Pyramid of King Unas, the last ruler of the 5th dynasty. Inside his burial chamber and antechamber, hundreds of vertical columns of hieroglyphs cover the walls. These texts describe the king's journey into the afterlife, offering instructions for overcoming obstacles, invoking divine protection, and ensuring spiritual transformation. They provide invaluable insight into Egyptian religious beliefs and reveal how the concept of the afterlife became more elaborate and codified during this period. The presence of written texts inside pyramids represented a major conceptual shift. Earlier pyramids relied primarily on architecture, ritual performance, and symbolic design to support the king's transition to the next world. With the introduction of the pyramid texts, language itself became a tool of divine power. Words were no longer just spoken during ceremonies. They were permanently inscribed into the tomb, reinforcing the king's eternal protection. This innovation continued into the 6th dynasty under rulers such as Teti, Pepi I, Merenre, and Pepi II. Their pyramids, many located at Saqqara, also included inscribed texts. As more kings adopted this practice, the body of funerary literature expanded. Additional spells were added, modified, or reinterpreted, reflecting changes in religious doctrine and ritual practice. These inscriptions formed the foundation for later texts, including the coffin texts and the Book of the Dead, which would eventually become accessible to nobles and commoners. Architecturally, The pyramids of the 5th and 6th dynasties differed noticeably from the massive monuments of the 4th dynasty. Builders increasingly used smaller limestone blocks and less durable materials. This shift was partly practical. The centralization seen under Khufu and Khafra had weakened slightly, reducing the resources available for construction. Population growth and administrative changes also meant that labor and supplies had to be distributed across many projects, rather than concentrated on a single monumental tomb. The decline in size and material quality should not be interpreted as a decline in cultural significance. These pyramids reflected evolving priorities. Whereas earlier rulers emphasized physical scale as a symbol of divine authority, later kings expressed their religious role through inscriptions, temple reliefs, and solar symbolism. Funerary architecture broadened from a primarily structural focus to a more integrated religious experience. Mortuary temples attached to 5th and 6th dynasty pyramids often featured intricate decorative programs. Reliefs depicted agricultural scenes, religious rituals, and offerings to the gods. These images were believed to sustain the king in the afterlife, providing nourishment and maintaining cosmic order. The continued emphasis on temple construction reveals that the ritual life surrounding the pyramid remained central to its function. Another important development of this period was the growing role of officials and priests. The pyramid complexes required ongoing maintenance, including daily offerings and ceremonial activities. To support this, kings endowed estates and agricultural lands whose produce funded the activities of temple staff. Records from this era mention high-ranking officials serving as overseers of pyramid construction, priests of specific ceremonies, and administrators responsible for managing estates tied to the king's funerary cult. This expanding bureaucratic network influenced Egypt's social and political landscape, distributing power among educated elites. The increasing involvement of officials also appears in the private tombs built near the royal pyramids. At sites like Saqqara and Abu Sir, nobles constructed large mastabas decorated with vivid reliefs showing scenes from daily life. These private tombs reflect broader changes in religious thought. Concepts of the afterlife that were once exclusive to the king gradually became available to high-ranking officials. The pyramid texts themselves would later evolve into funerary literature for non-royal individuals, a shift with long-lasting consequences. As the Old Kingdom progressed into its later centuries, Egypt's political and social landscape began to shift in profound ways. The centralized system that had supported the monumental pyramid projects of the 4th, 5th, and early 6th dynasties started to weaken. The once powerful pharaoh, who had stood at the center of national authority, gradually lost influence as new pressures emerged from within and beyond the state. By the end of the Old Kingdom, pyramid building slowed dramatically, reflecting deeper fractures in Egyptian society. One of the earliest signs of decline appeared during the reign of Pepi II, the long-ruling pharaoh near the end of the 6th dynasty. Although his reign is traditionally regarded as extraordinarily lengthy, the exact duration remains debated. What is clear, however, is that a reign stretching across many decades created unique challenges for governance. As Pepi II aged, the stability of succession became uncertain. The political structure that relied on a strong central figure began to show strain, and regional officials gained increasing authority. Without a consistently active and vigorous ruler at the helm, the royal court struggled to exert its former control over distant regions. The rise of nomarchs, provincial governors who administered Egypt's nomes, or regional districts, marked a major shift in local power dynamics. In earlier centuries, nomarchs had played important roles in tax collection, agricultural management, and local governance, but they remained firmly subordinate to the pharaoh. Over time, however, these officials began to accumulate wealth, influence, and hereditary authority. Many nomarchs developed strong ties to local populations and built elaborate tombs for themselves, decorated with inscriptions that detailed their achievements and emphasized their independence. This growing regional power base weakened the unity of the state and diverted resources that had once flowed directly to the royal building projects. Economic pressures also played a significant part in the decline of pyramid building. Large monuments required extensive labor, generous supplies of food and materials, and effective transportation networks. By the late Old Kingdom, signs of economic strain appear in administrative records and archaeological evidence. Maintaining the elaborate mortuary cults of earlier kings placed heavy demands on agricultural estates and temple resources. As local officials controlled more land and wealth, the central government found it increasingly difficult to support the large-scale construction projects that had defined earlier dynasties. Environmental changes may have contributed to these difficulties. Evidence from sediment studies and climate research suggests that the Nile experienced periods of low inundation during this era. Reduced flooding meant reduced crop yields, which in turn affected every aspect of Egyptian life. A society so dependent on the regular rhythm of the Nile was vulnerable to disruptions in food production. Crop shortages strained the economy, limited state resources, and increased competition for agricultural land. In such conditions, massive pyramid projects were no longer sustainable priorities. The political consequences of these pressures became increasingly visible. Conflicts between regional leaders and the weakened central authority grew more common. The once unified administrative system broke into competing power centers, each seeking to preserve its own interests. Without the strong ideological and material support that earlier kings had enjoyed, the pharaoh's role shifted from godlike ruler to symbolic figurehead. While kings continued to build pyramids, these structures grew smaller, simpler, and less durable, reflecting the diminishing ability of the state to command the resources necessary for monumental architecture. One example of this decline can be seen in the Pyramid of Pepi II. Although built with the traditional layout of a burial complex, the craftsmanship and materials were noticeably reduced in quality compared to the grand constructions of the Fourth Dynasty. The emphasis on inscribed pyramid texts, which had become a standard feature in Sixth Dynasty pyramids, suggests that spiritual continuity remained important, even as physical monuments diminished in grandeur. The effort to preserve religious traditions, despite limited resources, points to a culture attempting to maintain stability during turbulent times. The weakening of central authority also affected the workforce system that had supported pyramid construction. In earlier periods, labor forces were organized through a combination of taxation, corvée labor, and a sense of national duty tied to the divine kingship. As local leaders gained more autonomy, coordinating these labor forces became more challenging. Workers were increasingly tied to their local regions rather than mobilized for national projects. The breakdown of administrative control meant that the state could no longer rely on the large, well-organized labor teams that had once enabled the construction of massive pyramids. As the Old Kingdom drew to a close, Egypt entered a period of fragmentation known as the First Intermediate Period. This era was marked by division, with competing dynasties and regional rulers asserting authority in different parts of the country. The political fragmentation reflected and amplified the social and economic instability that had been developing for decades. In this environment, the grand tradition of royal pyramid building came to a temporary halt. While some small pyramids and local tombs continued to appear, none matched the scale, complexity, or symbolism of the monuments constructed during the height of the Old Kingdom. The First Intermediate Period was not only a time of political disruption, but also a period of cultural change. As royal authority diminished, local traditions and regional artistic styles flourished. Tomb inscriptions from this period often emphasize personal achievement, local governance, and moral conduct rather than royal service. These inscriptions reveal individuals asserting their identities outside the shadow of the pharaoh, a significant shift from earlier periods when royal ideology dominated public life. As Egypt emerged from the political fragmentation and economic hardship of the first intermediate period, a new era of stability and cultural renewal began to take shape under the rulers of the Middle Kingdom. This period, spanning the 11th and 12th dynasties, marked a deliberate effort to restore centralized authority, revive religious traditions, and reaffirm the symbolic power of kingship. Pyramid building, dormant during the Age of Division, returned as an important architectural expression, but in forms that differed significantly from the grand stone monuments of the Old Kingdom. The Middle Kingdom pyramids were not simply imitations of earlier models. They reflected new political realities, evolving religious ideas, and practical adaptations suited to a reunified but cautious state. The rebirth of pyramid construction began in earnest under King Amenemhat I, founder of the 12th dynasty. After consolidating control over the country and establishing a new capital at Ichtawi near the Fayum region, Amenemhat I sought to connect his reign with the prestigious legacy of the Old Kingdom. Building a pyramid was one way of declaring continuity with the past, while ushering in a new age of order and prosperity. His decision to construct a pyramid at Lisht demonstrated both political ambition and a desire to root the revived monarchy in familiar symbols of divine authority. Unlike the massive stone pyramids of earlier centuries, Amenemhat I's pyramid was built with a core of mud brick, encased in fine limestone. This change in construction material was not merely a matter of reduced resources. Mud brick allowed for faster building and greater flexibility in design, while the outer casing provided the visual impression of a traditional stone monument. However, this approach came with drawbacks. Over the centuries, much of the mud brick core eroded, leaving the internal structure exposed. The damage visible today gives the impression of a ruin, but in its original form, the pyramid would have stood proudly as a symbol of restored kingship. The surrounding complex also reflected Middle Kingdom architectural style. The mortuary temple attached to Amenemhat I's pyramid included offering halls, storage chambers, and ceremonial spaces. Reliefs and inscriptions depicted scenes of ritual activity, reinforcing the king's relationship with the gods. The temple layout demonstrated increasing complexity and a renewed emphasis on the daily cult that sustained the king's spirit in the afterlife. A causeway linked the mortuary temple to a valley temple near the Nile, continuing a tradition established in the Old Kingdom but adapted to local geography. Following Amenemhat I, his successor Senusret I continued the pyramid building tradition, also choosing Lisht as the site for his monument. Senusret I's pyramid shared many features with its predecessor. It too had a mud brick core and limestone casing, surrounded by a complex filled with chapels, guardian statues, and ritual buildings. The mortuary temple of Senusret I is especially noted for its high-quality craftsmanship. Fragments of reliefs discovered at the site show detailed scenes of the king interacting with deities, presenting offerings, and affirming his divine role. These carvings reflected a growing artistic sophistication in the Middle Kingdom. One of the most distinctive features of Middle Kingdom pyramid complexes was the addition of subsidiary pyramids for queens and royal family members. These smaller structures, built near the king's pyramid, demonstrated the increasing importance of royal women and the extended family within the evolving political structure. Their placement near the main pyramid signaled a desire for unity in death as well as in life, reinforcing the idea that the royal household played a collective role in maintaining cosmic order. As the 12th dynasty progressed, pyramid construction expanded to new locations. Kings such as Senusret II and Senusret III built their pyramids at sites including Meidum and Dahshur. The choice of these sites reflected both practical considerations and symbolic intentions. At Lahun, the pyramid of Senusret II stood near an important irrigation project connected to the Fayum, highlighting the king's role in improving agricultural life. The use of mud brick cores continued, but decorative elements and temple structures showed increasing architectural experimentation. Senusret III, one of the most powerful rulers of the dynasty, built his pyramid at Dahshur, not far from Sneferu's earlier monuments. His decision to return to Dahshur placed his legacy in conversation with the accomplishments of the Old Kingdom, reinforcing continuity while emphasizing transformation. Senusret III's pyramid exemplified innovation. Its internal structure included a complex system of passageways, chambers, and blocking stones designed to thwart tomb robbers. The increasing use of security features during this period reflected heightened concerns about protecting royal burials in an era marked by greater political mobility and regional activity. Amenemhat III, often regarded as one of the greatest builders of the Middle Kingdom, constructed not one but two pyramids. His first, at Dahshur, is known today as the Black Pyramid due to the coloration of its now exposed mud brick core. Structural problems emerged early in its construction, possibly due to ground instability or architectural strain. The builders attempted repairs, reinforcing internal chambers and adjusting architectural features. But ultimately, the pyramid experienced significant settling. Recognizing the structural issues, Amenemhat III commissioned a second pyramid at Hawara, farther south. This decision underscores a pragmatic approach to pyramid building. When a monument failed to meet expectations, the king simply redirected resources to a location better suited to long-term preservation. The pyramid at Hawara became famous in antiquity for its elaborate mortuary temple, often referred to by Greek writers as the labyrinth. Although only fragments remain today, ancient descriptions suggest a vast complex filled with courtyards, corridors, and chambers arranged in a grand, maze-like pattern. This temple was among the most ambitious architectural projects of the Middle Kingdom, demonstrating the era's emphasis on ritual activity and symbolic meaning. The labyrinthine design may have been intended to represent the complexity of the afterlife or the king's journey through sacred realms. The Middle Kingdom pyramids reveal a shift in architectural priorities. During the Old Kingdom, the pyramid's external form and monumental scale served as the primary expression of royal authority. In the Middle Kingdom, inner complexity, religious sophistication, and temple design took center stage. While the physical size of pyramids decreased, the symbolic depth of their associated rituals and structures increased. This transformation aligns with broader changes in Egyptian religious thought. Beliefs about the afterlife became more elaborate, with increasing emphasis on written spells, ritual guidance, and the involvement of multiple deities in the king's journey beyond death. In this context, the pyramid texts of the Old Kingdom evolved into the coffin texts, a broader collection of funerary writings that extended beyond royalty to include nobles and wealthy individuals. This democratization of the afterlife shaped the architectural landscape. As the king's exclusive spiritual role softened, pyramid complexes became part of a wider tradition of burial practices shared across social classes. Nevertheless, the royal pyramid remained a potent symbol of legitimacy and divine connection, anchoring the Middle Kingdom's political and religious identity. The labor system that supported pyramid building also changed during this period. Although large workforces were still needed, the state's approach to organization became more efficient and better structured. The restored central authority maintained greater oversight of regional resources, and improved irrigation and agricultural management ensured a more stable supply of food. This allowed pyramid projects to proceed without the overwhelming strain that had contributed to the Old Kingdom's decline. The administrative documents discovered from Middle Kingdom sites reveal a high degree of planning and record-keeping. including careful tracking of supplies, labor assignments, and ritual offerings. As Egypt progressed through the Middle Kingdom, a profound transformation occurred in its understanding of death, the afterlife, and the spiritual journey that awaited every human being. For centuries, the afterlife had been framed largely as a royal privilege. The earliest pyramids, mortuary temples, and funerary rituals were designed to ensure that the king alone could ascend to the heavens, join the gods, and maintain cosmic balance. Ordinary people, by contrast, relied on far simpler burial customs and had limited access to the complex spiritual protections afforded to pharaohs. But during the Middle Kingdom, this system of belief evolved dramatically. Concepts that had once been reserved for the king began to spread across social layers, leading to a broader, more inclusive vision of eternal life. This shift is most clearly visible in the development of the coffin texts, a major corpus of funerary writings that expanded upon the pyramid texts of the Old Kingdom. While the pyramid texts had been inscribed exclusively inside the tombs of kings, the coffin texts were written on wooden coffins belonging to nobles, officials, and, eventually, individuals of modest status. These inscriptions included spells, invocations, and narratives that guided the deceased through the dangers of the underworld, ensuring their protection and successful transformation in the afterlife. The spread of such texts marked a significant democratization of Egyptian religious thought. One of the key differences between the earlier pyramid texts and the emerging coffin texts lies in the audience they addressed. The pyramid texts spoke to the king in formal, authoritative language, emphasizing his divine nature and cosmic responsibilities. The coffin texts, by contrast, were written for a variety of individuals who could not claim divine origin. As a result, the language of the coffin texts became more personal, more adaptable, and more relatable. They offered practical guidance rather than assuming inherent divine status, describing challenges such as navigating the underworld, avoiding malevolent forces, and securing the food, water, and shelter needed in the realm of the dead. Spells within the coffin. Texts often provided the deceased with new identities or magical forms. For example, one set of spells allowed the individual to transform into a bird capable of flying across the sky, echoing the royal tradition of joining the sun god on his celestial journey. Other spells granted the ability to assume the form of protective deities or to move freely between the land of the living and the dead. These ideas reflected a growing belief that the afterlife was accessible to all who prepared themselves correctly, not only to the pharaoh. The creation and distribution of the coffin texts were closely tied to changes in Egyptian society. As the Middle Kingdom restored central authority, the administrative class grew more influential. Officials who managed estates, supervised building projects, or served in the royal court gained wealth and status. Many of these individuals sought funerary privileges similar to those once reserved for the king. Their elaborately decorated coffins, inscribed with protective spells and images, reveal a desire to secure eternal life through knowledge and ritual, rather than through monumental architecture alone. At the same time, priests and scribes played a crucial role in shaping and transmitting these new religious texts. As guardians of ritual knowledge, they adapted older traditions to fit the needs of a broader population. The dissemination of funerary texts allowed scribes to gain prominence as both spiritual and intellectual authorities. Their work preserved ancient ideas while introducing new interpretations that resonated with changing social realities. This evolution of religious literature illustrates how intellectual life in Egypt remained dynamic, adapting to shifts in power, culture, and belief. The expansion of afterlife access also influenced burial practices. While earlier elites had favored mastabas or rock-cut tombs, Middle Kingdom burials often included wooden coffins richly decorated with painted scenes, deities, and hieroglyphic inscriptions. These coffins were designed to serve as miniature protective environments, functioning in place of the grand stone structures that had once surrounded royal burials. Multiple layers of coffins, sometimes nested within each other, became increasingly common. The practice emphasized the importance of spiritual protection and ritual preparation over monumental construction. The coffin itself became a kind of symbolic tomb. Its decorations and inscriptions created a sacred space that guided the deceased toward rebirth. Images of the sky goddess Nut, often painted on the underside of coffin lids, reinforced the idea that the deceased would be embraced by the heavens. Elaborate depictions of gods, offering scenes, and daily life mirrored the comprehensive protection once provided by entire pyramid complexes. In this way, the coffin served both practical and spiritual roles, embodying the new vision of afterlife accessibility. This period also witnessed the growing importance of the concept of the heart and the judgment of the dead. While earlier beliefs had focused primarily on ascension and transformation, Middle Kingdom texts began to reference moral conduct and divine judgment more clearly. These ideas would later evolve into the famous scenes of the heart being weighed against the feather of Ma'at, a key feature of the New Kingdom's funerary literature. Although not yet fully developed, the seeds of moral evaluation in death began to take root during the Middle Kingdom, reflecting a broader belief that ethical behavior during life influenced one's fate in the afterlife. The democratization of afterlife beliefs did not diminish the king's spiritual significance. Pharaohs of the Middle Kingdom continued to construct pyramids and maintain lavish mortuary cults. However, their role shifted subtly. Instead of standing alone at the cosmic center, the king became part of a larger religious community in which all Egyptians could aspire to eternal life. This shift changed the symbolic purpose of the pyramid itself. While still important, the pyramid was no longer the sole gateway to the afterlife. It became one element in a broader religious landscape that included individualized spiritual preparation, sacred texts, and personal moral responsibility. The changing nature of afterlife beliefs also influenced artistic representation. Middle Kingdom tomb art became more detailed, expressive, and varied. Scenes depicting daily life, farming, fishing, feasting, music, and craftsmanship appeared frequently in tombs, reflecting the belief that the deceased would continue these activities in the next world. These scenes served both decorative and functional purposes, providing the deceased with the tools and pleasures needed to enjoy eternal existence. The attention to ordinary activities also reveals a growing appreciation for the life of common people, not just the divine role of the pharaoh. As Egypt moved from the Middle Kingdom into the New Kingdom, a profound shift in royal burial practices marked the end of the long tradition of pyramid building. While pyramids had once served as the central expression of kingship, divine connection, and eternal life, they no longer suited the political, economic, and religious realities of the New Kingdom. Instead, rulers turned toward hidden tombs carved into desert cliffs, grand mortuary temples separated from burial sites, and a spiritual landscape shaped more by ritual texts and moral ideas than by towering stone structures. This transformation reflects not a decline in monumental ambition, but a reorganization of how the Egyptians expressed power, protected their rulers, and understood the afterlife. The New Kingdom began after a period of foreign rule and fragmentation known as the Second Intermediate Period. When the kings of Thebes reunited the country, they sought to establish a new era of stability and religious devotion. The early New Kingdom rulers, such as Ahmose, Amenhotep I, and Thutmose I, were determined to demonstrate their authority in ways that resonated with both tradition and innovation. Yet these rulers faced a challenge. The pyramid, once a symbol of divine kingship, could no longer fulfill its function in a world where tomb robbery had become increasingly common. During the Middle Kingdom and the turbulent period that followed, the looting of royal tombs had become a widespread problem. The wealth buried with kings, gold, jewelry, statues, ritual objects, and sacred texts, attracted thieves who could not be deterred by the monumental scale of pyramids or their protective architecture. Even the smaller and more complex pyramids of the Middle Kingdom offered too many visible clues to the location of burial chambers. As royal burials became increasingly vulnerable, the state had to reconsider how best to protect the remains of its rulers. The solution emerged during the reign of Thutmose I, who initiated a bold departure from the traditional pyramid. Instead of building a towering monument, he directed his architects to carve his tomb deep into the cliffs of a remote desert valley on the west bank of Thebes. This area, later known as the Valley of the Kings, would become the primary burial ground for New Kingdom pharaohs. The idea behind this shift was simple but ingenious. By hiding royal tombs in inaccessible locations and separating them from their mortuary temples, the state could reduce the risk of tomb robbery while still maintaining elaborate ritual practices. The Valley of the Kings introduced an entirely new approach to royal burial. Unlike the pyramids, which dominated the skyline, these tombs were intended to be invisible from the surface. Their entrances were cut into ravines or slopes and concealed amid natural formations. Inside, the tombs extended deep into the rock, following long corridors and descending passageways that ultimately led to the burial chamber. The interior spaces were richly decorated with scenes from funerary texts, such as the Amduat and the Book of Gates, which described the journey of the sun god through the night and guided the king through the underworld. These texts, painted vividly on the walls, replaced the external symbolism of the pyramid with a complex internal narrative. The tomb itself became a spiritual map, guiding the king toward rebirth and eternal life. The emphasis on interior decoration reflected the broader religious shifts discussed earlier. Knowledge, moral conduct, and spiritual preparation held greater importance than monumental stone structures. The divine journey was now envisioned through painted images and sacred writings rather than through the architectural symbolism of ascending pyramid sides. While the tombs themselves were hidden, the mortuary temples associated with them were constructed in more accessible locations closer to the Nile. These temples served as the focal points for daily offerings and ritual ceremonies dedicated to the deceased king. They were often grand and intricately designed, with massive pylons, open courtyards, columned halls, and sacred sanctuaries. The construction of these temples demonstrates that the New Kingdom did not abandon monumental architecture. Rather, it redistributed its symbolic and functional roles. The tomb protected the king's body, while the temple preserved his memory and maintained his eternal cult. One of the most famous mortuary temples is that of Hatshepsut at Deir el-Bahari. Built against the cliffs of western Thebes, this temple stands as an architectural masterpiece of terraces, colonnades, and ramps. Its design blended natural landscape with human craftsmanship, symbolizing harmony between the divine and earthly realms. The temple's reliefs depict Hatshepsut's divine birth, her expedition to the land of Punt, and her offerings to the gods, illustrating how New Kingdom monuments emphasize narrative and ritual rather than sheer scale. Although Hatshepsut was a unique figure, a female pharaoh who ruled with authority equal to any male predecessor, her temple demonstrates the larger architectural trends of the period. Later rulers, such as Amenhotep III and Ramesses II, continued this tradition with grand mortuary temples of their own. Amenhotep III's temple, though heavily ruined today, was once among the largest ever built, symbolized by the towering colossi of Memnon that still stand at its entrance. Ramesses II constructed the Ramesseum, a vast complex filled with colossal statues, monumental gateways, and detailed inscriptions celebrating his reign. These temples were political instruments as well as spiritual centers, showcasing the pharaoh's achievements, military victories, and divine connections. The separation of tomb and temple during the New Kingdom also had practical advantages. Because tombs were hidden, they required less visible monumental architecture, which reduced the incentive for thieves and lessened the strain on resources. Temples could be built in the fertile floodplain, closer to population centers, where priests and workers could maintain daily rituals more easily. This arrangement reflected a more efficient distribution of resources, allowing the state to invest in religious display without compromising the security of royal burials. The architectural innovations of the New Kingdom also mirrored broader cultural changes. The expansion of the empire brought wealth, foreign influence, and new ideas. Artistic styles evolved, incorporating greater realism and narrative detail. Religious beliefs became more elaborate, with increased emphasis on the sun god, the underworld journey, and moral judgment. These developments shaped the visual and symbolic program of royal tombs and temples. The emphasis on hidden burial chambers reflected not only practical concerns but also deeper spiritual themes. The king's journey into the underworld mirrored the sun's nightly descent into darkness, followed by a triumphant rebirth at dawn. This shift away from pyramids did not imply a rejection of past traditions. Many New Kingdom rulers honored earlier kings through restoration projects and references to ancient texts. The pyramids of the Old Kingdom remained cultural landmarks, admired for their antiquity and symbolism. Some New Kingdom pharaohs even undertook repairs or built small structures near these ancient monuments. But the time for building giant pyramids had passed. The symbolic language of kingship had changed, and new forms of religious expression had taken hold. The decline of pyramid construction during the New Kingdom underscores the flexible and adaptive nature of Egyptian civilization. Rather than clinging to outdated practices, rulers reshaped their traditions to meet new challenges, from security concerns to evolving religious doctrines. The decision to abandon visible pyramids in favor of hidden tombs was not a sign of weakness, but an indication of strategic innovation. It allowed kings to protect their remains more effectively while focusing their architectural resources on temples that reinforced their public image and spiritual authority. While pyramid construction in Egypt faded with the passing of the New Kingdom, the architectural tradition did not disappear entirely. Instead, it found new life to the south in the lands of Nubia and Kush, regions whose cultures had long shared deep connections with Egypt. Here, centuries after Egyptians had abandoned the pyramid as a royal tomb, local rulers revived and reinterpreted the ancient form, creating a distinctive architectural tradition that extended well beyond Egypt's own timeline. The pyramids of Nubia and Kush stand today as powerful reminders of cultural exchange, adaptation, and the enduring allure of monumental architecture. The roots of this story extend far back into the Middle Kingdom, when Egypt expanded its political and military influence into Nubia. Egyptian forts, trading centers, and temples established along the Nile introduced Egyptian culture, religious practices, and artistic styles to the region. Over time, Nubian elites adopted elements of Egyptian administration, dress, religion, and burial customs. These exchanges were not one-sided. Nubians contributed their own traditions, forming a blended cultural landscape along the river. After the decline of the New Kingdom, Egyptian control over Nubia weakened. Local leaders gained independence, and by the rise of the Napatan Kingdom, Nubia had developed into a confident and powerful civilization in its own right. Located near the site of Gebel Barkal, the Napatan rulers saw themselves as heirs to the spiritual authority of ancient Egypt. They adopted Egyptian deities, rituals, and symbols, integrating them into their own cultural framework. This desire to connect with Egypt's sacred traditions played a crucial role in the revival of pyramid building in the region. The first Nubian pyramids appeared during the early Napatan period at the royal cemetery of El Kuru. Unlike the massive stone structures of the Old Kingdom, these pyramids were smaller, steeper, and constructed from sandstone blocks. Their proportions differed from Egyptian models, featuring sharp angles and slender silhouettes. This distinctive form reflected Nubian aesthetics rather than an attempt to replicate Egyptian architecture exactly. It demonstrated how the idea of the pyramid could evolve across cultural boundaries. Many of the early Nubian rulers buried at El Kuru are associated with the powerful Kushite kings, who would later rule Egypt during the period often called the 25th dynasty. Among them was King Piye, a ruler known for uniting Nubia and extending his authority into southern Egypt. Piye saw himself as a restorer of ancient traditions and a champion of divine order. His victory stela, written in formal Egyptian style, describes his religious devotion and his respect for Egyptian culture. It is fitting, then, that he chose to be buried beneath a pyramid at El Kuru, reaffirming his connection to the legacy of Egypt's distant past. The pyramids at El Kuru were part of larger burial complexes that included underground chambers, chapels, and offering structures. Inside the burial chambers, walls were often decorated with scenes from Egyptian funerary texts and images of deities such as Osiris, Isis, and Anubis. These artistic choices reveal the extent to which the Napatan rulers embraced Egyptian religious ideas. Yet the Nubian funerary tradition also incorporated local elements, including specific burial customs and ceremonial practices that reflected regional identity. The blending of Egyptian and Nubian traditions produced a unique form of pyramid culture that was neither entirely foreign nor wholly borrowed. Following El Kuru, the royal cemetery shifted to Nuri, where some of the largest Nubian pyramids were built. Among the most notable is the pyramid of King Taharqa, one of the most influential Kushite rulers and a pharaoh of Egypt's 25th dynasty. Taharqa's reign marked a high point in the political and cultural integration of Egypt and Nubia. His pyramid at Nuri was significantly larger than earlier structures and featured a steep profile characteristic of Nubian design. Beneath the pyramid, his burial chamber displayed fine craftsmanship and elaborate decoration, indicating the importance of funerary architecture in Kushite royal ideology. The pyramids of Nuri highlight a key difference between Egyptian and Nubian traditions. Nubian pyramids were often built atop extensive underground tombs carved deep into the bedrock. Access to these burial chambers was typically gained through a long stairway descending from a chapel located on the pyramid's eastern side. This arrangement emphasized the importance of the eastern direction, associated in both Egyptian and Nubian belief with the rising sun and the cycle of rebirth. The use of underground chambers also reflects influence from Egyptian rock-cut tombs, especially those of the New Kingdom, demonstrating another layer of cultural exchange. After the Napatan period, the center of Kushite power shifted southward to the city of Meroe. Here, pyramid construction continued for several centuries, resulting in one of the largest collections of pyramids in the ancient world. The Meroitic pyramids, built from sandstone blocks, were smaller and more numerous than their Napatan predecessors. They featured even steeper angles and distinctive decorative elements, such as capstones shaped like birds, solar discs, or sacred emblems. These stylistic features highlight the increasingly unique identity of the Meroitic civilization, which blended Egyptian influences with local artistic innovations. The burial practices at Meroe also show a distinct evolution. While the pyramids themselves were external markers of royal and elite burials, the actual tombs lay beneath the ground, accessed through stairways leading to multi-room chambers. These chambers often contained painted scenes, ceramics, jewelry, offerings, and everyday objects intended to support the deceased in the afterlife. The artistic styles within the tombs reveal a vibrant culture with its own iconography, even as echoes of Egyptian tradition remained present. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Meroitic pyramid tradition is its longevity. Long after Egypt had abandoned pyramids as royal tombs, the rulers of Meroe continued to build them. The last known pyramids in the region were constructed many centuries after the final Egyptian pyramid. This persistence demonstrates that the pyramid form had taken on a new life, one rooted in local values and independent of its original context in Egypt. For the people of Meroe, the pyramid became a symbol of royal heritage, continuity, and cultural identity. The rediscovery of the Nubian pyramids in the modern era has provided historians and archaeologists with a wealth of information about the history of the Kushite kingdoms. Early European explorers were astonished to find so many pyramids in the Sudanese desert, often assuming that they must be related directly to the Egyptian pyramid builders. Although connected through shared cultural history, the Nubian pyramids represent a distinct architectural tradition. Their unique styles, construction techniques, and burial customs demonstrate how ancient societies adapted ideas across time and space. Long after the last pyramid had been built in Egypt, long after the Old Kingdom kings had turned to dust, the pyramids continued to stand as silent witnesses to the passage of time. Their immense size and mysterious origins captured the imagination of visitors for many centuries. Among the most curious and influential of these visitors were the Greeks and later the Romans, whose writings shaped how the ancient world understood the pyramids. These outsiders did not inherit the cultural knowledge that once surrounded the monuments, so they interpreted them through their own traditions, philosophies, and expectations. Their accounts, while sometimes accurate and occasionally insightful, were often filled with misunderstandings, exaggerations, or imaginative storytelling. When Greek travelers began arriving in Egypt during the first millennium BCE, the pyramids were already ancient. More time separated the Greeks from the builders of the Great Pyramid than separates the modern world from the time of the ancient Greeks. As a result, even the Egyptians of that later period had limited knowledge about the earliest pyramid builders. The priests who served as guides to Greek visitors offered explanations rooted in religious lore, oral traditions, and interpretations shaped by the Egypt of their own time. The Greeks, in turn, filtered these stories through their own worldview, producing accounts that blended observation with speculation. One of the most famous Greek writers to describe the pyramids was Herodotus, often called the father of history. During his travels in Egypt, he interviewed priests and collected stories about the origins and purpose of the pyramids. His account, written in the 5th century BCE, remains one of the earliest surviving descriptions of these monuments by an outsider. Herodotus wrote about the construction of the Great Pyramid, the labor involved, and the supposed cruelty of the pharaoh who ordered it. He claimed that Khufu forced many thousands of Egyptians into harsh labor for decades. While this narrative reflected the Greek tendency to view foreign monarchs as tyrants, it also revealed how little was understood about the labor systems of the Old Kingdom. Modern discoveries have shown that pyramid workers were not oppressed slaves, but organized laborers supported by a system of rations, housing, and administration. Still, Herodotus's writings had tremendous influence. His colorful descriptions shaped the imagination of later generations, who relied on his accounts in the absence of other sources. To many Greek readers, the pyramids became symbols of excessive pride, tyranny, and the misuse of royal power. They saw the monuments not as achievements of architectural innovation and religious devotion, but as the extravagant indulgences of oppressive rulers. This perspective contrasted sharply with how Egyptians themselves had viewed the pyramids, but it became a dominant interpretation in the classical world. Another Greek writer, Diodorus Siculus, visited Egypt several centuries after Herodotus. His account, written in the 1st century BCE, echoed earlier misconceptions while adding new interpretations. Diodorus suggested that the pyramids were built not for religious reasons, but as practical efforts to occupy the population and prevent rebellion. He also described the engineering methods used to transport heavy stones, but admitted that much of what he reported was based on local legend rather than first-hand knowledge. His writings demonstrate how the pyramids had become part of a vast tapestry of stories, some rooted in fact and others born from speculation. Strabo, a Greek geographer who traveled to Egypt during the early Roman period, provided one of the more careful ancient descriptions of the pyramids. Although he did not fully understand their construction or symbolism, he offered observations about their size, orientation, and surrounding landscape. Strabo described the Great Pyramid as astonishing in its precision, and noted the skill required to shape and fit the stones. His account suggests a certain admiration for Egyptian craftsmanship, but like his predecessors, he relied heavily on local guides for explanations. By the time the Romans conquered Egypt, the pyramids had become a well-known attraction for travelers, officials, scholars, and soldiers stationed in the province. Roman visitors approached the pyramids with curiosity and awe, often leaving graffiti on the monuments as a record of their presence. Some inscriptions carved into the stones of the Great Pyramid include the names of Roman soldiers, short messages, or simple declarations of having visited the site. These markings reveal that the pyramids were not remote or mysterious structures inaccessible to the public. They were part of a living landscape, integrated into the social and cultural life of Roman Egypt. Roman writers also contributed to the body of literature about the pyramids. Pliny the Elder, a Roman scholar, wrote about the pyramids in his encyclopedic work, Natural History. He repeated many earlier stories, including the idea that the pyramids were built out of vanity, or to prevent the pharaohs from leaving wealth to their successors. Although his interpretations were often speculative, they reflect the enduring fascination that the pyramids held for visitors from across the ancient world. During the Roman period, the pyramids also became connected with myths and legends that blended Egyptian tradition with Greco-Roman imagination. Some stories claimed that the pyramids housed the treasures of ancient kings. Others suggested that they contained secret knowledge or magical objects. While these tales lacked historical accuracy, they reveal how the pyramids continued to inspire wonder and speculation long after their builders were gone. The pyramids also played a role in early scientific inquiry. Greek and Roman mathematicians, intrigued by the geometric precision of the structures, attempted to calculate their dimensions, angles, and proportions. Although their measurements were not always perfect, their interest illustrates how the pyramids served as a source of intellectual curiosity. Some philosophers viewed the monuments as symbols of human achievement, representing the triumph of reason and engineering over natural limitations. As the ancient world shifted and new powers rose across the Middle East and North Africa, the pyramids of Egypt entered another stage of their long and complex history. No longer the focal point of royal cults or the subject of Greek and Roman scholarly curiosity, the pyramids became part of a changing cultural landscape shaped by the spread of Islam, the growth of new cities, and the evolving interests of medieval scholars, travelers, and rulers. This period introduced fresh interpretations, new legends, and occasional acts of both preservation and destruction. Through these centuries, the pyramids continued to stand as massive symbols of Egypt's ancient past, even as new civilizations layered their own meanings upon them. The arrival of Islam in Egypt during the 7th century of the Common Era marked a profound cultural and political transition. As Arab forces established control over the land, they encountered monuments whose vast age and mysterious origins inspired awe and curiosity. Although the early Islamic rulers focused primarily on governing and integrating Egypt into the expanding caliphate, the pyramids soon drew the interest of scholars, poets, administrators, and travelers. These new observers brought with them a fresh intellectual tradition, grounded in Arabic scholarship and influenced by earlier classical writings. Many medieval Islamic scholars viewed the pyramids as marvels created by ancient peoples whose knowledge had been lost. Without access to hieroglyphic inscriptions, still undeciphered at the time, these scholars constructed their own explanations based on oral traditions, local lore, and philosophical reasoning. Some attributed the pyramids to legendary kings or prophets. Others believed they were built to preserve knowledge in anticipation of the Great Flood mentioned in religious texts. These interpretations reflected both admiration and bewilderment, expressing a deep awareness of the pyramid's antiquity. One influential Islamic historian, al-Makrizi, wrote extensively about the pyramids in his works describing Egypt's geography and history. Drawing on earlier sources as well as local traditions, he recorded a variety of theories regarding the purpose of the pyramids. Some accounts suggested they were granaries built by Joseph, the Quranic figure associated with storing grain during years of famine. Others proposed they were monumental tombs built by ancient kings who sought eternal fame. Al-Makrizi's writings demonstrate how medieval observers attempted to reconcile the pyramids with broader religious and historical narratives. The fascination with the pyramids was not limited to scholars. Poets and storytellers of the medieval Islamic world often referenced the pyramids in their writings. They saw them as symbols of the impermanence of earthly power, contrasting the achievements of ancient kings with the inevitable passage of time. The pyramids served as metaphors for both human ambition and divine order, inspiring reflections on fate, memory, and the limits of knowledge. At the same time, the pyramids continued to attract travelers from across the Islamic world. Many visitors came to Cairo, which had grown into a thriving cultural and economic center under various dynasties, including the Fatimids, Ayyubids, and Mamluks. The pyramids, located just a short journey from the city, became popular destinations for curious travelers. Medieval accounts describe expeditions to the Giza plateau, where visitors rode camels across the desert and climbed the massive stone blocks to reach the summit. These climbs were often dangerous, but offered sweeping views of the Nile Valley and Cairo, creating memorable experiences that travelers recounted in their writings. Despite the sense of wonder inspired by the pyramids, this period also witnessed acts of physical alteration and damage. In some cases, local rulers attempted to dismantle parts of the pyramids to reuse the stone for building projects. Stone was a valuable resource, and the finely cut limestone blocks of the pyramids offered an appealing supply. One widely cited example involves the Mamluk ruler Al-Aziz Uthman, who ordered efforts to dismantle the Great Pyramid. Workers attempted to remove casing stones from the exterior, but the task proved extremely difficult and inefficient. The effort left visible scars on the pyramid's structure, though ultimately it was abandoned. In addition to deliberate dismantling, natural erosion and human activity continued to affect the pyramids during the medieval period. Sandstorms, temperature fluctuations, and the gradual buildup of sand around the base of the monuments contributed to their weathering. Meanwhile, tomb robbers and treasure seekers explored the pyramids, driven by legends of hidden riches. These explorations often left structural damage, especially in the corridor systems of smaller pyramids. However, not all interactions with the pyramids during this era were destructive. Some rulers recognized the symbolic and historical value of the monuments and took steps to preserve them. The Fatimid caliphs, in particular, showed interest in Egypt's ancient heritage, sometimes commissioning studies of the pyramids or sponsoring repairs to damaged structures. These efforts, though limited, reveal an awareness of the pyramid's significance that extended beyond mere curiosity. Islamic architects and builders also drew inspiration from the pyramids. While they did not replicate the pyramid form itself, they incorporated elements of ancient Egyptian design into their own monuments. The geometric precision, monumental scale, and alignment seen in Islamic architecture of the region reflect a deep appreciation for the engineering mastery of earlier civilizations. Cairo's architectural landscape became a blend of influences, merging Pharaonic, Greco-Roman, and Islamic styles into a unique urban environment. As centuries passed, the pyramids became increasingly integrated into the identity of medieval Egypt. They were no longer merely relics of a distant past, but landmarks woven into the daily life of the region. Bedouins camped near the monuments, local farmers grazed livestock on the surrounding land, and city dwellers visited the pyramids on holidays or special occasions. The Giza plateau remained a living landscape, where ancient and modern worlds coexisted. The medieval Islamic world also produced some of the earliest attempts to measure and describe the pyramids scientifically. Scholars used geometric methods to calculate their dimensions, angles, and volumes. While these measurements were not always accurate by modern standards, they demonstrated a growing interest in understanding the monuments through reason and observation, rather than solely through legend. This intellectual curiosity laid important groundwork for the later development of Egyptology. As the medieval world transitioned into the early modern era, the pyramids of Egypt remained largely mysterious to outsiders. Travelers occasionally recorded their impressions, and scattered scholars attempted rough measurements. But systematic study had not yet taken shape. This changed dramatically at the turn of the 19th century, when European powers, driven by scientific ambition, imperial competition, and intellectual curiosity, turned their attention toward Egypt. At the center of this transformation was a military and scholarly expedition led by Napoleon Bonaparte, whose campaign in Egypt reshaped how the Western world understood the country's ancient past and opened the door to the discipline now known as Egyptology. When Napoleon launched his Egyptian campaign, he sought not only strategic advantage, but also scientific prestige. Determined to emulate the great conquerors of history while advancing knowledge, he brought with him a remarkable contingent of scholars, engineers, artists, mathematicians, geographers, and naturalists. This group, known collectively as the savants, represented one of the most ambitious scientific expeditions the world had ever seen. Their mission was to study Egypt's natural environment, ancient monuments, languages, culture, and history in unprecedented detail. The arrival of Napoleon's forces in Egypt marked a dramatic moment for the pyramids. For the first time in many centuries, the monuments became the focus of sustained, systematic investigation, rather than casual observation or mythic speculation. The savants approached the pyramids not as enigmatic relics, but as subjects of scientific inquiry. They measured their dimensions, sketched their shapes, documented their surroundings, and recorded their condition. These studies were part of a larger effort to catalog Egypt's cultural heritage, an endeavor that would eventually result in one of the most influential publications of the 19th century. The scholars produced detailed drawings, maps, and architectural plans of the pyramids. They recorded observations on construction techniques, stone types, erosion patterns, and alignments. Their meticulous work represented a major departure from earlier interpretations that had relied heavily on legend or second-hand accounts. The savants sought to understand the pyramids through direct observation and rational analysis, laying the foundation for scientific archaeology. Perhaps the most iconic symbolic moment of this encounter occurred when Napoleon himself viewed the pyramids during the Battle of the Pyramids. Although the name is somewhat misleading, the battle took place at a considerable distance from the monuments. The event captured the imagination of later writers and artists, Napoleon was said to have addressed his soldiers with the words, "40 centuries look down upon you," invoking the vast span of history represented by the pyramids. Whether he spoke these exact words is uncertain, but the idea that the modern world stood in the shadow of ancient Egypt resonated deeply in European thought. One of the most significant outcomes of Napoleon's expedition was the discovery of the Rosetta Stone, a granodiorite slab inscribed with a decree written in 3 scripts: hieroglyphic, Demotic, and Greek. Although discovered at the town of Rosetta rather than at the pyramids, the stone would prove essential to understanding the ancient culture that created the pyramids. The Greek inscription offered a key to deciphering the hieroglyphs, but this breakthrough would not occur until later, when the scholar Jean-François Champollion achieved it after years of analysis and comparison. The publication that emerged from Napoleon's expedition, known as the Description de l'Égypte, represented one of the most ambitious scholarly works of its era. This monumental multi-volume series included detailed descriptions, illustrations, maps, and scientific analyses covering every aspect of Egyptian life and landscape. From flora and fauna to ancient architecture and everyday customs. The pyramids occupied a central place in the work. Lavish plates depicted their forms, sections, and surroundings. Scholarly essays analyzed their construction, symbolism, and historical context. Through this publication, people across Europe gained access to accurate and detailed knowledge of the pyramids for the first time. The Description de l'Égypte helped spark a wave of Egyptomania across Europe. Artists, architects, writers, and intellectuals became fascinated by Egyptian motifs. Obelisks, sphinx statues, and pyramid shapes appeared in decorative arts, garden designs, and public buildings. Museum collections expanded rapidly as explorers and collectors sought to acquire artifacts. Although this surge of interest had both positive and negative consequences, fueling scholarship but also encouraging looting, it ensured that Egypt and its pyramids were firmly embedded in the cultural imagination of the 19th century. The decades following Napoleon's campaign saw the rise of professional Egyptology as a discipline. Champollion's decipherment of hieroglyphs marked the turning point. When he announced his breakthrough, the ancient voices inscribed on temple walls, tombs, and monuments were finally unlocked. For the first time in thousands of years, scholars could read the names, titles, prayers, rituals, and historical records carved into stone by ancient Egyptians. This revolution transformed understanding of the pyramids. Instead of relying on Greek or medieval interpretations, researchers could now consult ancient texts that described kings, ceremonies, and architectural projects. Armed with this new linguistic tool, scholars began to construct a timeline of Egyptian history grounded in primary sources. They identified the builders of the pyramids, reconstructed royal genealogies, and deciphered inscriptions that illuminated religious beliefs and funerary practices. Excavations at Giza, Saqqara, and Dahshur gained new purpose as archaeologists sought to connect physical structures with written records. The combination of archaeological discovery and textual analysis allowed for a fuller, more nuanced understanding of the Pyramid Age. The 19th century witnessed pioneering fieldwork by European scholars such as Carl Richard Lepsius, who led an expedition that systematically documented monuments throughout Egypt and Nubia. Lepsius produced detailed maps, drawings, and descriptions that continue to serve as valuable references today. His work at Giza, in particular, provided a record of the pyramids before modern excavations altered their appearance through clearance and restoration. With the birth of modern Egyptology in the wake of Napoleon's expedition and the decipherment of hieroglyphs, a new century of exploration began at the pyramids. This period, stretching through the 19th and early 20th centuries, marked a transformative yet turbulent phase in the study of Egypt's ancient monuments. Archaeologists, adventurers, diplomats, and collectors streamed into Egypt, each driven by a mixture of curiosity, ambition, scientific interest, and sometimes profit. Their efforts produced extraordinary discoveries that reshaped historical understanding. But they also resulted in irreversible damage through destructive excavation methods, competition for artifacts, and insufficient documentation. This era stands as both a foundation of modern archaeology and a cautionary tale about the complexities of studying the ancient world. During the 19th century, Egypt found itself increasingly drawn into the orbit of European powers. The growing presence of French and British officials, scholars, and entrepreneurs provided opportunities for exploration, but also raised concerns about the protection and ownership of antiquities. As European institutions sought to expand their museum collections, Egypt's ancient sites became targets for large-scale excavations and, at times, blatant removal of artifacts. While many scholars genuinely sought to advance knowledge, the era also produced treasure hunters whose interests lay in acquiring objects rather than understanding their context. One of the earliest and most influential figures of this period was Giovanni Battista Belzoni, an Italian adventurer whose physical strength and daring personality made him a legendary figure in Egyptian exploration. Belzoni was not a trained archaeologist, but a man of remarkable energy and persistence. He carried out excavations at several major sites, including the Valley of the Kings, where he uncovered decorated tombs and transported massive statues down the Nile. Belzoni also conducted work around the pyramids, clearing sand from entrances and passages. Although his methods lacked the precision expected of modern archaeology, his efforts brought many monuments to light and introduced the Western world to spectacular discoveries. Yet the haste and force of his work often caused damage, and his lack of systematic recording limited the scientific value of some of his findings. As the 19th century progressed, more systematic archaeological work began to replace the treasure-hunting mindset. One of the key figures in this shift was Auguste Mariette, a French scholar who founded the Egyptian Antiquities Service. Mariette recognized that Egypt's monuments were vulnerable to uncontrolled excavation and illegal export. His mission was to preserve and study the ancient heritage of Egypt while curbing the flow of artifacts out of the country. Mariette's excavations at Saqqara, where he uncovered the Serapeum and numerous Old Kingdom tombs, demonstrated a more methodical approach. He documented his work carefully and emphasized the importance of understanding archaeological context. Under his leadership, the first Egyptian museum dedicated to ancient artifacts was established in Cairo, laying the groundwork for national stewardship of Egypt's heritage. Despite these advances, challenges remained. Excavations around the pyramids continued to attract individuals with varying levels of expertise. Some operated with genuine scholarly intention, while others sought to fulfill the demands of collectors and institutions abroad. The competition for discoveries created an environment in which speed often took precedence over careful methodology. Valuable information about layers, placement, and artifact relationships was sometimes lost as excavators rushed to unearth items of interest. During this period, the Giza plateau became a major focus of archaeological and scientific activity. Explorers removed centuries of accumulated sand, exposing structures and passages long buried. The Great Pyramid's interior was mapped with increasing precision, revealing details of its chambers and passageways that had been imperfectly understood for centuries. At the same time, smaller pyramids, mastabas, and workmen's villages around the plateau received greater attention. Each excavation added new pieces to the puzzle of how the pyramids were built, who worked on them, and how they were used in both life and death. One of the most influential archaeologists working at Giza during the early 20th century was George Reisner, an American scholar whose rigorous methods helped establish scientific standards for excavation. Reisner led the Harvard University Boston Museum of Fine Arts expedition, conducting long-term research at Giza and other sites. His work combined meticulous documentation with careful analysis of artifacts and architecture. Reisner's excavations revealed detailed information about the families of officials buried near the pyramids, providing insight into the administrative and social structures of the Old Kingdom. He uncovered statues, reliefs, and funerary equipment that shed light on the lives of those who served the pharaohs. His contributions significantly advanced understanding of the pyramid builders as individuals rather than anonymous laborers. Yet even in this era of increasing scientific rigor, mistakes and misunderstandings occurred. Excavators sometimes misidentified structures or drew incorrect conclusions about their purpose. In certain cases, early archaeologists underestimated the complexity of Old Kingdom burial practices, interpreting secondary burials, intrusive shafts, or reused tombs without full awareness of local traditions. Over time, improved methods and new discoveries corrected many of these early errors. But the process highlights the evolving nature of archaeological interpretation. The 19th and early 20th centuries also saw the growth of public fascination with ancient Egypt. Newspapers and magazines eagerly reported on discoveries, often exaggerating their significance or framing them in dramatic language. The pyramids became the subject of lavish illustrations, books, exhibitions, and lectures. Archaeologists gained celebrity status, and their discoveries influenced art, architecture, literature, and popular culture. This growing interest brought attention to the preservation of ancient sites, but also fueled demand for artifacts, creating tensions between scientific study, public enthusiasm, and ethical concerns. Artifact removal during this period became a subject of increasing controversy. While some objects were legally exported under agreements with the Egyptian authorities, others were taken illegally or without adequate documentation. Many ended up in museums across Europe and North America, where they contributed to scholarly research, but also raised questions about cultural ownership. The ethical debates surrounding these practices continue to influence discussions about repatriation and the responsibilities of modern institutions. Amid the achievements and challenges of the time, significant strides were made in understanding pyramid construction. Archaeologists discovered workers' settlements, including the remnants of bakeries, breweries, workshops, and living quarters. These finds contradicted long-standing myths that the pyramids were built by enslaved labor. Instead, evidence pointed to a well-organized workforce supported by a system of provisions and overseen by administrators and skilled craftsmen. Discoveries of tools, pottery, animal bones, and food remains helped piece together the daily life of the workers, offering a more accurate and human perspective on pyramid building. The early 20th century also saw advances in technological approaches to archaeology. Researchers experimented with photography, surveying instruments, and early forms of structural analysis. These innovations allowed for more detailed measurement and mapping of the pyramids, contributing to a deeper understanding of their design and engineering. Although modern technologies such as laser scanning and muon imaging were still far in the future, the groundwork laid during this period paved the way for future discoveries. As Egypt moved toward independence in the 20th century, the role of Egyptian scholars and institutions in studying and preserving their own heritage became increasingly prominent. The involvement of Egyptian archaeologists brought new perspectives to the interpretation of ancient sites and strengthened national efforts to protect the pyramids from looting and environmental damage. Collaboration between international teams and Egyptian authorities helped establish standards for excavation and conservation that continue to guide archaeological practice today. As the 20th century unfolded and moved into the 21st, the study of Egypt's pyramids entered an entirely new era, one defined not by treasure hunting or speculative theories, but by scientific methods, interdisciplinary research, and technological innovation. Archaeologists, engineers, physicists, geologists, and digital specialists joined forces to investigate the pyramids in ways that earlier generations could scarcely have imagined. This transformation has allowed scholars to correct earlier misconceptions, uncover details hidden for millennia, and construct a more accurate picture of how these ancient monuments were planned, built, and used. Modern Egyptology has not only broadened our knowledge of the pyramids, but has also deepened our appreciation for the sophistication of the societies that created them. One of the most important developments in modern pyramid research has been the rise of systematic archaeological excavation, based on precise recording, careful stratigraphic analysis, and strict conservation practices. These methods replaced the hurried digging and incomplete documentation that characterized earlier periods. Archaeologists today work slowly and meticulously, often spending multiple seasons studying a single area. Every stone, tool fragment, pottery shard, and organic remain is recorded, photographed, and analyzed. This level of detail has produced insights into aspects of pyramid building that were previously unknown or misunderstood. A major breakthrough in understanding the human side of pyramid construction came from the discovery and excavation of workers' villages near Giza. These settlements, located southeast of the pyramids, revealed traces of bakeries, breweries, dormitories, kitchens, storage spaces, and workshops used by the builders. Archaeologists uncovered evidence of bread and beer production on an industrial scale, animal bones from cattle and goats, and simple tools that reflect daily life. These findings showed that pyramid building was supported by a highly organized provisioning system. Workers were well-fed, housed, and supplied, contradicting long-held ideas that enslaved labor built the pyramids. Instead, a combination of skilled craftsmen, full-time laborers, and rotating crews of conscripted workers formed an integrated workforce. This discovery fundamentally reshaped public understanding of pyramid construction. Modern technologies have also revolutionized how researchers study the pyramid's internal structures. Ground-penetrating radar, micro-robots, three-dimensional mapping systems, and thermal imaging have allowed exploration of areas that would have been too dangerous or inaccessible in the past. Among the most significant recent innovations is the use of cosmic ray muon detection. Muons are subatomic particles that naturally pass through the Earth's atmosphere and can penetrate stone. By placing sensitive detectors in and around the pyramids, scientists can measure variations in muon density to identify hidden cavities or structural differences deep inside the monuments. Muon imaging led to one of the most remarkable discoveries of recent years: the identification of a large void above the Grand Gallery in the Great Pyramid. Although the purpose of this void remains uncertain, its detection demonstrates how non-invasive technologies can reveal features that traditional excavation could never access. While careful analysis is ongoing, the discovery has reignited discussions among scholars about the internal engineering of the pyramid and the strategies ancient builders used to manage weight and structural pressure. Digital reconstruction and three-dimensional modeling have further transformed pyramid research. Using advanced software, archaeologists and engineers can simulate ancient construction techniques, analyze the stability of architectural features, and test hypotheses about how massive stones were transported and assembled. These models allow researchers to explore scenarios in a controlled environment without disturbing the actual monument. Digital simulations have helped support theories involving sledges lubricated by water, ramp systems with multiple segments, and coordinated lifting mechanisms. Such studies illustrate the impressive engineering knowledge possessed by ancient builders. Geological research has also played a significant role in modern pyramid studies. By analyzing the composition of limestone and granite blocks, geologists can trace the origins of the stones and reconstruct ancient quarrying methods. Research into fossil shells embedded in limestone blocks has helped determine which quarries supplied specific parts of the pyramids. These techniques provide richer context for understanding the logistical networks involved in pyramid construction. They also shed light on how ancient Egyptians selected materials based on durability, symbolic meaning, and proximity to the building site. Modern conservation efforts represent another crucial aspect of this era. The pyramids have endured thousands of years of environmental changes, human activity, pollution, and natural erosion. Preservation specialists now work to stabilize cracked stones, clean damaged surfaces, restore structural integrity, and protect the monuments from further deterioration. They use scientific methods to analyze the chemical composition of ancient mortar, identify salts that accumulate in the stone, and understand how temperature shifts affect structural stability. These conservation projects combine traditional craftsmanship with modern materials, ensuring that the pyramids remain accessible to future generations. Collaborative international projects have become central to the field. Teams from Egypt, Europe, Asia, and the Americas work together to share data, conduct excavations, and publish research. These collaborations emphasize transparency, scholarly rigor, and respect for Egyptian leadership in archaeological stewardship. Egyptian archaeologists increasingly direct major projects, offering perspectives deeply rooted in the country's cultural heritage. This shift reflects the value placed on local knowledge and national pride in preserving ancient history. Another significant contribution of modern Egyptology is the re-evaluation of long-standing myths. Earlier theories, often sensationalized, suggested extraterrestrial influence, lost civilizations, or mysterious powers. Modern scholarship has steadily dismantled these ideas using evidence-based analysis. Archaeological discoveries, engineering studies, and historical research demonstrate that the pyramids were built by human hands, guided by administrative organization, mathematical understanding, and engineering skill. This evidence encourages a more realistic admiration for the achievements of ancient Egyptians, rather than attributing their accomplishments to supernatural explanations. Linguistic research has also deepened understanding of the pyramids. Continued study of hieroglyphic inscriptions, including those found in later pyramids, provides insight into religious beliefs, ritual practices, and political structures. Texts carved into pyramid walls, coffins, and tombs reveal how ancient Egyptians conceptualized the afterlife, divine kingship, and cosmic order. As translations improve and previously unknown texts come to light, scholars gain a richer appreciation of the cultural context that shaped pyramid construction. Modern Egyptology has contributed significantly to debates about how the pyramids were intended to function symbolically. While earlier interpretations focused on the pyramids as tombs, many scholars now emphasize their broader role in expressing cosmic order and royal ideology. Alignments with celestial bodies, proportions grounded in sacred geometry, and spatial relationships within pyramid complexes all point to a sophisticated integration of religion, astronomy, and architecture. These insights reflect a multi-dimensional understanding of the pyramids as both physical structures and symbolic landscapes. In addition to scientific and historical advances, the modern era has seen increased engagement with the pyramids through education, media, and public outreach. Documentaries, books, virtual tours, and museum exhibitions bring new discoveries to global audiences. Interactive digital platforms allow people around the world to explore the pyramids through detailed models and simulations. These educational tools help bridge the gap between academic research and public understanding, ensuring that the pyramids remain not only objects of study, but also sources of wonder and inspiration. As the modern world gained access to the pyramids through photography, film, archaeology, and mass communication, a fascinating duality emerged. On one hand, Scientific research and professional Egyptology steadily unveiled the true history of these monuments, revealing them as the remarkable achievements of ancient human ingenuity, organization, and religious devotion. On the other hand, popular culture and pseudo-scientific theories grew rapidly, often overshadowing rigorous scholarship with sensational claims and imaginative storytelling. This tension between fact and fiction became one of the defining features of the pyramid's modern legacy. To understand why the pyramids became the focus of so many myths, it is essential to recognize the emotional and cultural power carried by their appearance. The Great Pyramid, in particular, stands as a geometric marvel, its scale and precision so striking that many observers, especially in earlier centuries, struggled to believe that ancient people with limited tools could have built it. The absence of detailed ancient construction records, combined with the monument's massive size, created a space where speculation could flourish. Even as archaeological evidence grew stronger, some public narratives continued to drift further away from reality. One of the most enduring pseudo-scientific claims involves the idea that extraterrestrial beings, or advanced lost civilizations, built the pyramids. These theories emerged in various forms during the 20th century, gaining traction through books, television programs, and later the internet. Proponents often argued that the engineering techniques required to lift massive blocks and execute precise alignment exceeded the capabilities of ancient Egyptians. Such arguments ignored decades of archaeological evidence that clearly demonstrates the organization, tools, and methods used by human workers. Nevertheless, the appeal of mysterious or supernatural explanations proved difficult to resist for many audiences. These extraterrestrial theories also reflected deeper cultural issues. For many scholars, the suggestion that a non-human intelligence built the pyramids diminishes the achievements of an ancient African civilization. This viewpoint risks erasing the ingenuity, labor, and cultural richness of the people who lived along the Nile. Modern Egyptology emphasizes this point, arguing that the pyramids should be recognized as human accomplishments rooted in local skills, social structures, and religious beliefs, not as products of some unknown or mythical society. Another popular misconception involves the pyramid builders themselves. For many decades, especially in early Hollywood films and novels, the pyramids were depicted as monuments built by enslaved laborers suffering under brutal conditions. This image resonated with dramatic storytelling traditions but lacked historical accuracy. Archaeological discoveries of workers' villages, medical care facilities, and administrative records reveal that the builders were organized laborers who received food, housing, and medical treatment. Many were skilled craftsmen who took pride in their work. The persistence of the slave labor myth reveals how powerful narratives can overshadow factual evidence, especially when they align with modern assumptions or dramatic expectations. The pyramids also became embedded in mystical and New Age belief systems during the 20th century. Ideas about pyramid energy claimed that the shape of the pyramid could preserve food, sharpen razor blades, or promote spiritual healing. Although such claims lacked scientific basis, they contributed to the cultural image of the pyramid as a structure possessing mysterious or supernatural properties. Some groups constructed small pyramid replicas for meditation or personal rituals, believing the form itself held cosmic significance. These trends demonstrated how deeply symbolic the pyramid shape had become, independent of its historical context. Literature and film played a major role in shaping the modern imagination of the pyramids. Adventure novels often portrayed Egypt as a land of hidden treasures, curses, and ancient secrets waiting to be uncovered. Films about mummies and explorers reinforced dramatic and fantastical elements, prioritizing entertainment over historical accuracy. While these stories captivated audiences and introduced many people to Egypt's ancient world, They also reinforced stereotypes and misunderstandings. The line between historical Egypt and fictional Egypt became blurred, complicating efforts by scholars to communicate accurate research to the public. The pyramids also became a frequent subject of conspiracy theories. Some writers suggested that the monuments encoded secret mathematical knowledge, astronomical predictions, or prophecies about future events. Others claimed that the pyramids aligned with distant constellations in the ways that indicated hidden messages or supernatural guidance. While it is true that ancient Egyptians were skilled observers of the sky and deliberately aligned their structures with cosmic phenomena, many modern interpretations overinflate or distort these connections. Egyptologists caution against drawing conclusions that exceed the evidence, emphasizing instead the cultural and religious meanings understood by the people who built the monuments. Despite the proliferation of myths, popular culture has also played a valuable role in keeping public interest in the pyramids alive. Documentaries, historical dramas, educational programs, and digital media platforms have introduced the pyramids to audiences around the world. Some productions present rigorous research in an accessible way, helping viewers appreciate the complexity and brilliance of ancient Egyptian engineering. Others blend entertainment with fact, sparking initial curiosity that may lead to deeper learning. Even when popular portrayals lean toward the fantastical, they contribute to the pyramid's enduring place in global imagination. The rise of digital media has further shaped how people engage with the pyramids. Virtual tours, drone footage, laser-scanned models, and interactive maps allow viewers to explore the monuments from perspectives that were previously impossible. These tools bridge the gap between academic research and public understanding, offering detailed visualizations that convey the scale, geometry, and internal layout of the pyramids. In many cases, digital platforms have countered myths by presenting factual information appealingly and clearly. For Egyptologists, the challenge has been to navigate the space between public fascination and scientific accuracy. Scholars frequently address misconceptions through lectures, books, interviews, and educational outreach. Many researchers emphasize that the real story of the pyramids, one grounded in human creativity, administrative coordination, and religious devotion, is far more compelling than the myths. When the historical and archaeological evidence is presented clearly, audiences often respond with renewed respect for the ancient builders. Pseudoscientific theories also reveal something important about modern audiences: a deep desire for mystery and wonder. The pyramids, with their scale and antiquity, naturally inspire questions that feel larger than life. While scholarly research answers many of these questions, others remain open, inviting speculation. It is precisely this combination of knowledge and mystery that sustains the pyramid's magnetic appeal. Even within academic circles, debates persist about construction techniques, symbolic meanings, and historical interpretations. Uncertainty does not diminish the pyramids; it enhances their allure. As the story of the pyramids enters the modern era, the focus shifts from discovery and interpretation to protection and preservation. The pyramids have survived thousands of years of desert winds, shifting sands, political upheavals, and human interaction. Their continued existence is a testament to the remarkable skill of their builders. Yet even these ancient monuments are not immune to the pressures of the contemporary world. Today, the pyramids stand at a crossroads, celebrated as iconic symbols of human history, while simultaneously facing threats from environmental changes, urban expansion, mass tourism, and the complex challenges of conservation. Safeguarding them for future generations has become an urgent global responsibility. One of the most significant challenges to the pyramids is environmental change. The Giza plateau, once isolated in the desert, is now surrounded by the ever-expanding city of Cairo. Air pollution from vehicles and industrial activities affects the limestone surfaces of the pyramids, accelerating erosion and discoloration. Fine particles carried by polluted air settle on the stones, contributing to a slow but steady degradation. Temperature fluctuations, intensified by urban heat, cause expansion and contraction in the limestone blocks, weakening joints and creating microfractures. While the pyramids were designed to withstand natural conditions, they were never intended to endure modern environmental pollutants. Wind and sand also remain constant forces of erosion. Although the desert climate contributes to the preservation of organic materials, the abrasive action of wind-blown sand can wear down exposed stone surfaces over time. Conservation teams regularly monitor the pyramids for signs of structural stress, cracks, and surface loss. In some cases, protective measures such as controlled barriers or targeted cleaning help reduce further damage. Yet these interventions must be carried out with caution. Excessive restoration risks altering the original character of the monuments. Another major concern is groundwater. As modern irrigation systems and urban water networks expand, the water table around Cairo has risen in certain areas. Increased moisture can seep into ancient stone structures, dissolving salts within the limestone and causing crystallization that weakens the material. At some archaeological sites in Egypt, rising groundwater has damaged foundations and walls. Although the Giza plateau remains relatively stable due to its elevated position, nearby areas such as Saqqara and Dahshur have required significant conservation efforts to address moisture-related damage. Mass tourism presents a dual challenge. The pyramids are among the most visited monuments in the world, attracting millions of visitors each year. Tourism provides essential revenue for Egypt and promotes global appreciation of ancient heritage. However, the sheer number of visitors creates physical stress on the monuments. Foot traffic erodes pathways, humidity from breathing accumulates inside burial chambers, and accidental contact or vandalism leaves marks on fragile surfaces. Managing this flow of visitors requires careful planning to balance public access with long-term preservation. To address these challenges, Egyptian authorities and international organizations such as UNESCO collaborate on conservation strategies. One approach involves limiting the number of visitors allowed inside certain areas at any given time. Rotating access to burial chambers helps prevent excessive humidity buildup. Ventilation systems have been installed in some pyramids to stabilize temperature and moisture levels. These measures reflect a growing understanding that preservation must be proactive rather than reactive. In addition to environmental and tourism pressures, urban development poses risks to the pyramid's surroundings. The city of Cairo continues to expand toward the Giza plateau, bringing with it construction projects, traffic congestion, and infrastructure networks. Although protective zones restrict building activity near major archaeological sites, enforcement can be challenging. Roads and new settlements have crept closer to the pyramids over the decades, altering the visual landscape that once framed the monuments in open desert. Conservationists advocate for sustainable urban planning that respects the cultural significance of the area while accommodating the needs of a growing population. Efforts to preserve the pyramids also extend to documenting and analyzing them with modern technology. Laser scanning, high-resolution photography, and three-dimensional modeling create digital records that capture the pyramid's current condition in extraordinary detail. These digital replicas serve multiple purposes. They allow researchers to monitor changes over time, support virtual reconstruction of damaged areas, and provide educational resources for people around the world who may never visit Egypt in person. Digital preservation ensures that even if physical deterioration continues, the form and knowledge of the pyramids will endure. Archaeological research remains ongoing at the Giza plateau and other pyramid sites. New discoveries frequently emerge from beneath the sand. Buried workshops, ancient tools, hidden shafts, and remnants of daily life. Each new find enhances understanding of the civilizations that built the pyramids and informs conservation strategies. For example, identifying the original quarry locations for limestone blocks helps conservators select compatible materials for repairs. Understanding ancient construction methods can guide modern restoration techniques. This dynamic interplay between archaeology and preservation illustrates how studying the past supports the future of the monuments. Local communities also play a vital role in protecting the pyramids. Residents living near archaeological sites often develop deep cultural connections to the monuments, passed down through generations. Many work as guides, researchers, security personnel, or support staff for tourism services. When conservation efforts respect local traditions and provide economic opportunities, they strengthen the relationship between communities and heritage preservation. Programs that involve local populations in site maintenance, education, and sustainable tourism help ensure that the pyramids remain valued by those who live closest to them. Global public interest in the pyramids also drives conservation. Donations, grants, international partnerships, and scientific collaborations provide resources and expertise that support preservation projects. Universities, museums, and research institutes contribute to these efforts by analyzing materials, developing conservation techniques, and training new generations of archaeologists. This shared investment reflects the recognition that the pyramids are part of humanity's collective heritage, not solely Egyptian treasures. At the same time, debates over ownership, repatriation, and representation have become increasingly prominent. Many artifacts removed from pyramid sites during the 19th and early 20th centuries are now housed in museums abroad. Discussions about whether these objects should be returned to Egypt continue, raising important questions about cultural property, historical justice, and global collaboration. While these debates can be complex and sensitive, they also highlight the enduring importance of the pyramids as symbols not only of ancient Egypt, but of the broader human story. The future of the pyramids depends on a balance between access and protection, science and tradition, global interest and local stewardship. As climate change accelerates, new conservation challenges may arise, including increased desertification, temperature extremes, and potential weather anomalies. Researchers are already studying how these factors might affect ancient stone and proposing long-term strategies to address them. Adaptive conservation plans must anticipate these shifts to ensure ongoing protection. Education remains a powerful tool for preservation. When visitors understand the fragility and significance of the pyramids, they are more likely to respect the monuments and support conservation efforts. Schools, documentaries, museums, and digital platforms play essential roles in promoting awareness. By teaching new generations about the history, engineering, and cultural meaning of the pyramids, the global community helps build a future in which these monuments remain appreciated and protected. Despite the challenges they face, the pyramids continue to inspire awe. Their survival across millennia demonstrates resilience in the face of natural forces and human activity. Standing beneath their massive stones, one senses the ambition of ancient builders and the passage of countless generations who have approached them with reverence, curiosity, or wonder. The pyramids remind us that human creativity can endure far beyond individual lifetimes, shaping the cultural memory of civilizations. As guardians of stone, the pyramids stand at the intersection of history and humanity. Their story reflects triumphs and tragedies, mysteries and revelations, continuity and change. The future of these monuments depends on the choices made today. choices guided by respect for the past and responsibility for the generations yet to come.